What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Game Time Discussions. I'm Dustin Zimmerman. Usually I am co-hosting with Emory, but he is busy due to the fact that he and his wife recently brought a baby into the world. So congratulations to them. What we're going to do today is go ahead and do a college football recap of week 5 and look ahead at week 6. We'll talk about the big games, talk about some specific players, coaches, and all the fun, interesting information that happened this week. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get that pulled up. I've worked out most of the technical difficulties we had last week, and my dogs are with me, and if you hear them snoring, then I apologize because that is just something that happens when they are with me. So let me go ahead and get that pulled up. There we go. So these are our rankings coming into the week. We're going to go ahead and start our recap with USC and Illinois. So USC and Illinois was a super fun game, absolute barn burner. Came down to the last second. Illinois did win the game on a game-winning field goal. My thoughts here is Lincoln Riley has to step up. He's got to get things figured out. He came into USC, which is a very prestigious football school with high expectations given his previous success at Oklahoma, and it was expected that he would maintain that success or improve on and eventually, to the boosters and fans, bring national championships to USC. He's doing well with recruiting this year, and then that's about it, though. He has not really done a whole lot else aside from that. So they continue to lose games. They continue to have a really bad defense and a really good offense. Mekhi Lemon is a really good wide receiver on that team. We expect him to go very highly in the draft. But that said, they need a defense to stop Luke Altmaier and every other team they're going to face. And if you don't recall, Illinois just got absolutely shellacked by Indiana last week. So them losing, or USC losing this game, says a lot about that Lincoln Riley team. Notre Dame absolutely destroyed Arkansas. They put up 42 in the first half and then ran a fake punt in the third quarter while up 29, which is an absolutely diabolical move, but was kind of hilarious. So, but Arkansas, a lot of changes need to come there. I really like Taylor Green, their quarterback. He's a fun dual threat guy, a lot of talent. But clearly something's just not going right on both sides of the ball there. And we're actually going to talk a little bit more about some changes we may see coming from them. Ohio State and Washington was a really fun game in the first half. Washington did a good job holding Ohio State down. Ohio State did score a second touchdown at the end of the first half. Jeremiah Smith scored it, and they went up 14-3. And then from there, Ohio State controlled the whole game, but in the second half, it kind of felt like no matter what the deficit was, Washington just wasn't going to catch up. I was not quite as high on Ohio State as I probably should have been coming into the year due to the fact that Julian Saban was a freshman quarterback, and I just didn't know if he'd be able to handle the expectations. So far this year, they've done really well, mostly because of their defense, holding Texas to 7 and Washington to 6. Washington does have Jonah Coleman and Damon Williams Jr., both really good players. Jonah Coleman's an amazing running back, Damon being the quarterback. And then I like Jedd Fisch, their coach. I'm not sure if they're going to reach, super high expectations this year. I do think he's laying a really good groundwork and foundation there, kind of rebuilding from Kalen DeBoer's time there. A lot of guys had transferred out after that. So I think he's a good guy for the job. I think he just needs a couple more years, and they're just not quite there yet. LSU Ole Miss was fun all week because Whit Weeks, LSU's linebacker, is dating Lane Kiffin's daughter, and it came out on Twitter and Instagram this past week, which obviously started a lot of banter as Lane Kiffin loves to live on social media. Again, you either love him or hate him, or you're like me and do both simultaneously. Mostly love. Big fan of Lane Kiffin at the end of the day. I think he's a really good coach and seems like a guy the players really like. But Trinidad Chambliss, the transfer quarterback for Ole Miss, showed out again, taking over for Austin Simmons due to his injury. Ole Miss really controlled the second half of this game. This was in Oxford. Ole Miss was the home team. It was a really good game, though. That being said, LSU is not meeting expectations, and Garrett Nussmeier, who me and Emory were both not very high on, at least not even close to where people had him at as being the best quarterback in the country and the Heisman frontrunner, number 1 overall pick this and that. We were saying from the beginning, we think he's good, but he's just not that guy. And he's only proven it this year so far. They had the win over Florida, which was mostly due to their defense, not their offense. And then in this one, he just looked like he couldn't get the job done there. So it's one of those things. LSU's got a really good defense. This is obviously going to be a close game from the start, just given the prestige of both of these teams. But Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss come out on top. LSU falls, and we will see how that affects the rankings in just a few minutes. Indiana looks to continue winning. They do. Kurt Cignetti continues to win. That's what he does. Google him. We've all heard the quotes and everything. Awesome coach. Team's really good. I am surprised this was only a 20-15 game. It was 20-13, and Fernando Mendoza, Indiana's quarterback, did run out and took a safety to end the game just to run the clock down. It was kind of an interesting move because he could have gone down much sooner, and the clock had already expired. I did expect Indiana to win by more in this game. And just due to the fact that Iowa does not look like they've really had an offense. They historically have not had an offense, and they haven't looked great this year. But their defense is still good. They're still an Iowa defense, and again, historically good defense. I need to see a little bit more out of Indiana. Still high on Fernando Mendoza. Emory called that very early on that he really likes Fernando Mendoza. He gets them to another win on the road. That's what really matters here. Indiana looks to continue winning. Oregon-Penn State was probably my favorite game of the week to watch, just as a neutral bias. Due to I had very high expectations of Penn State. Oregon is an interesting team because they came in with very high expectations, of course, given their recent success. And Dante Moore is a really good quarterback, but their wide receiver room had a lot of injuries. DeCorian Moore is really good. He's young, freshman, but he's getting the job done. He's really impressed me. The whole team played really well. Ended up going down to overtime, and Dylan Thieneman, who Emory and I had called out as a big transfer over the spring, coming from Purdue, makes the game-winning interception. Really fun game. It was the whiteout game for Penn State, and Oregon comes in and Dan Lanning gets the win. Talk about big game James Franklin. He still cannot get over the hump. Penn State was down 17-3, and Drew Aller made some really nice plays. Unfortunately, much like Nuss, I was actually high on Drew Aller, and he's just not meeting that expectation. He's not making the big plays. He's not consistently making the big throws, and big game James, unfortunately, loses another big game, and my Penn State undefeated prediction falls. So it is what it is. Alabama and Georgia, fantastic game. This game really felt like Alabama had control kind of the entire time, which was really surprising given that it's at Georgia. Kirby Smart has had issues beating Bama since he became the Georgia head coach. Very interesting that he used to be an assistant at Bama, in case you weren't aware. He's obviously been extremely successful at Georgia, but for whatever reason, playing Alabama, he just does not get the job done. Ty Simpson has really bounced back from that week 1 loss to Florida State. Alabama and Ty Simpson, he's really started to grow throughout the year. And Gunnar Stockton didn't look quite as good. That being said, Georgia's having some drops. They dropped a huge, potentially game-winning catch towards the end. So it's something where these are two highly touted teams. There's a lot of football left in the year. I wouldn't be surprised if either or both of these teams are in the playoff when it's all said and done. Quickly, I'm going to go back to the Illinois game because Emory did send me some information that he wanted me to include from himself since he is not here live. He told me I need to stop giving predictions on Illinois because I said last week they would beat Indiana, and then this week I thought that USC would beat Illinois. Emory had Illinois winning this game. He gets to determine all Illinois picks for us moving forward because clearly I can't get the job done when it comes to picking Illinois spreads or games or anything related to them. So that's just how it goes sometimes. All right. That being said, give some more thoughts that he gave me. Oregon, like I said, Dante Moore, really good quarterback. And Kenyon Sadiq, really good tight end. Mateo Uiagalelei, is probably a first round edge. Deny Dennis Sutton, who we've talked about for Penn State, probably a first round pick as well. We got to start talking about James Franklin and the Ryan Day hot seat conversation. So I've been given updates on potential hot seats, guys looking at probably getting fired. But Ryan Day, obviously successful, just won a national championship last year, but he can't beat Michigan. We're looking at a similar thing with Penn State and James Franklin, where he's going to continue to be highly successful. Penn State's going to stay a top 15, top 10 team every year that he's there. But can he get over that edge of taking them to conference championships and national championships, winning these big games? He just continues to not get it done. And Emory, who was not as high as I was on Drew Aller, said he's ready to give up on him, but he did make those big plays, like I was mentioning, and led him into overtime. But of course, threw the game away at the end. Upsets. If you didn't see, which I'm sure you did, Virginia pulls off a massive upset hosting Florida State. Sorry, Emory. Probably best he's not here live for this one. Emory is a big Florida State fan. The big takeaway I have from that is Florida State's still good. Virginia's offense is really good. Interesting that they lost to NC State, who just lost to Virginia Tech. So the ACC is starting to go all over the place now. And the craziest field storm happened here. It was in overtime. They threw it up. Tommy threw it to the end zone. It got picked off, and they landed in the end zone laying down. But with how Virginia's field is set up, the fans are basically on a hill right next to the end zone. And it's very easy for them to get onto the field, and they rushed while the wide receiver was laying down in the end zone, which is very scary. Luckily, I don't believe he was injured, and I don't believe there were any big issues from that. But that said, it's something, we've been seeing fines for field storms and everything like that. I would not be surprised if we see some harsher punishments and some discussions with the NCAA. I believe Virginia only got a $50,000 fine, and the SEC, I think when Mississippi State stormed against Arizona State, they got a $500,000 one. Just interesting how different that is among conferences. But this is one, usually I'm a big fan of the field storm and let the college kids have fun, that kind of thing. And this was the first one I was truly like, okay, that was pretty dangerous. We probably need to figure something out here, put some new safeguards in place because, have fun, enjoy the moment, feel that emotion. That's part of what makes college sports and college football so great. But we don't need to, put guys at risk like that. Luckily, it looked like some of the fans were kind of making a circle and trying to barrier him off so that he could get up and get out of the way. And the fan who ran by and threw up the middle finger at Tommy while filming. It's just stuff like that. We need to still treat them as humans, obviously. High emotions, everything. Have fun, run out, celebrate. We don't need to do that or put guys in danger, though. All right, I'll get off my soapbox and my get off my lawn part after that. I still love field storms. Hope they keep happening. Ole Miss did not storm the field with this upset. They did beat LSU, and Lane Kiffin continues to troll. He tweeted out a quote from Brian Kelly about how the game was circled and bookmarked and everything like that, and put it up within like an hour after the game. So I don't know if he had it planned or what, but Lane Kiffin is a funny guy. I continue to love and hate him. I'm still more on the love side than anything. And Brian Kelly drops a big game against Ole Miss. And we need to see how Nuss is going to bounce back, how that offense is going to get going. Because if LSU wants a shot making the playoff conference championships, they got to figure out that offense. They're too good of a defense not to get it figured out. The Sicko game of the week. We haven't had this in a while. If you don't know, Sicko games are ones where you go, what am I watching? Is this even college D1 level football? San Diego State was on the road against Northern Illinois. If you remember last year, Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame. Crazy upset. Awesome game. The total for this game was set at over-under was 41.5. They combined for 9. And that includes San Diego State hitting a game-winning field goal at the end. So if you're a fan of Sicko games like me, I'm trying to get Emory more into the Sicko games. And this is absolutely one. Go look at the stat sheet. They were both very bad, multiple turnovers. The time of possession was almost equal, so it was an incredibly equally sicko game, which is always fun to see. But yeah, super fun. I'm going to try to keep finding little tidbits like this and keep throwing them in as I come across them. Our seats that are getting hotter. Luke Fickle at Wisconsin. He is lucky they had a bye this week. He couldn't lose a game. So we've got him. His seat's got to be one of the hottest. Mike Gundy was the hottest seat. He got fired. So, and then Oklahoma State does not bounce back. Unfortunately, they lose to Baylor. I say unfortunately because it's always fun when a team fires their coach and then they immediately have success right after in a big game. But Mike Gundy, the winningest head coach ever at Oklahoma State, is no longer there. Billy Napier, still in the hot seat. He's expected to coach the rest of the year based on press releases from the university. He's got a huge opportunity this week. They'll be playing Texas. This is a game that could really help save him, and maybe Florida fans aren't even hoping they win because there's the chance that he gets to stay at his job for a little bit longer. But he stays on our hot seat list. He's got to get it figured out. Sam Pittman. So I made these presentations it's 2 p.m. on Sunday now. And when I was making this, I wanted to add Sam Pittman, so I did. And right before I started recording, or an hour or so before, Pittman was fired. So I was right on saying his seat was getting hotter. Apparently, it got scorching hot, and he's no longer there. Bobby Petrino is now the coach. If that sounds familiar and deja vu, it's because he's been the coach there before, and he got into a massive scandal on a motorcycle and some illicit activity with another person. So we'll just put it that way. Please read up on that if you have not heard the Bobby Petrino motorcycle story and the neck brace. Petrino essentially played the long game. He went to A&M as the offensive coordinator, got fired from that position along with the whole Jimbo Fisher staff. And when Elko took over, Petrino went to Arkansas to be the OC there, and now he's back to being the head coach. So we'll see how that goes. I'm a little concerned for Arkansas's future. Petrino has an interesting offense. I do think he didn't get a fair shake as far as being the coordinator with Jimbo's at A&M due to Jimbo not letting go of the reins. So I think it could be really fun, especially with Taylor Green being his quarterback. They could actually do really well on offense. Not sure if that'll fix the defensive issues they're having, which is they were really bad. Jeremiah Love did whatever he wanted. Jadarian Price also did whatever he wanted against them. But kind of fun that as I was talking about it and typing this up, he gets fired. And then Lincoln Riley, continuing to underperform at USC. Would not surprise me if this is his last year here. I don't think this is a situation where he's going to not make it through the year, but it wouldn't surprise me at the same time if that happened. I expect this to be more at the end of the year, though. Going into our Superdog recap, unfortunately, Emory and I both lost this week. I know, very sad. I had Tulsa covering against Tulane at plus 14.5. That unfortunately did not happen. Tulsa did not represent for me. Emory had Washington. They were, I believe, 10.5 when he called it, and it looked like they were going to get it done. But then second half they fell apart, and Ohio State just controlled the game. So neither of us were able to get it done. We went 0-2 this week. Emory's still looking for an outright winner this year. We're hoping to see them get back, or see us get back, get some wins, and we'll talk about our new Super Dogs in just a minute. Couple guys. So we're actually going to do 2 prospect spotlights today. First one, Dante Moore. Like I said, guy played incredible against Penn State, goes into the wideout, hostile environment, and gets the job done. He looked really good, 29 for 39, 348 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 10 rushes for 35 yards. He made big plays when he had to. He scrambled when he needed to, got the extra yards. A little bit dangerous runs a couple times. I was a little concerned for injuries and whatnot. But end of the day, he got it done. They get a big win. Oregon moves on, still undefeated. And Dante Moore looks really good. Would not surprise me if this is a guy that's moving into first-round territory. And Emory and I both talked about it. This is a guy who's looking really good. He's flying up the draft board. He came in with high expectations, and he's meeting them. Our second one Trinidad Chambliss, the transfer from Ferris State to Ole Miss, getting the job done again. 23 for 39, so a little bit lower completion percentage, but 314 passing yards and a passing touchdown. Dual threat guy. He had 14 rushes for 71 yards as well. This is his third game now with 300 plus passing yards and 50 plus rushing yards. So a guy, 0 stars, 0 real offers, went to Florida State, Ferris State, won the Natty and their version of the Heisman Trophy at that level. And then he comes into Ole Miss. Austin Simmons unfortunately gets hurt, but Chambliss making the absolute most of his opportunity. Here are our new rankings. So Ohio State gets a dub against Washington. Like I said, they stay number 1, as they should, in my opinion. Oregon moves up after their big win against Penn State. Miami, they had a bye week. They dropped down solely because of Oregon moving up. They go to number 3. Ohio State's going to be hosting Minnesota this upcoming week. Minnesota coming off a big win over Rutgers, really close game. That one's going to be at Ohio State. I expect them to win that handily. Oregon gets a bye week, much needed after the whiteout game against a really good Penn State team. Miami, coming off a bye week, will be at Florida State. So that's going to be a really fun game. Would have been a little bit more fun if Florida State hadn't dropped it to Virginia, but we'll talk about that one more in a little bit. Ole Miss, like I said, gets a big win hosting LSU. They jump up 9 spots. They're now number 4 in the country. They get a much-deserved bye week now as well. They are 5-0. Oklahoma comes off a bye week. Their next game is going to be at Kent State. John Mateer, with the injury, he had surgery on his hand, went successfully, expected to be out for 3 to 4 games. So as we kind of talk about Oklahoma's schedule moving forward, we'll talk a little bit more about what that's going to look like without John Mateer being healthy and what they're going to have to do to replace him. A&M gets a big win hosting Auburn. That was an absolute sicko game as well. If you watched that one, A&M won 16-10, but they had 400 something yards against Auburn, and then Auburn only had 170 yards or so. I'm gonna get the stats pulled up real quick. It was not a fun game if you were watching as a neutral fan. A&M's total yards 414, Auburn's 177. Auburn had 1 yard in the fourth quarter. They actually had more yards with their interception return at one point, which was 72 yards, I believe, compared to their second half total yards, which was insane. Penalties, though, were insane. A&M with 13 penalties for 119 yards. They had 2 missed field goals. They had that pick I was talking about, which came off of Terry Bussey's hands. It was a drop pass. It was a high throw from Marcel. Marcel also missed a wide open Casey Concepcion, which would have been a touchdown. They also had a pass to Mario Craver brought back because of one of the penalties, which was a touchdown. This game should have been much more lopsided, but A&M's got to put it together. We finally saw a really good defense performance from them with 5 sacks, but then the offense disappears. Marcel Reed not running as much, don't know what happened there. Le'Veon Moss played fantastic, though. Give a quick shout out to him. And I know I'm biased, but he went 21 carries for 139 yards and a touchdown. That was also partly because he had 3 rushes for 0 or 1 yard when they were running the clock down their last drive. But huge game. They need to keep it going. They are going to be hosting Mississippi State in their next game, which Mississippi State we will talk about in just a second when we get to Tennessee. Penn State obviously is going to drop after losing a game, especially at home. They drop down to number 7, dropping 4 spots. Their next game is going to be at UCLA, who is still winless with Nico Iamaleava. So I expect Penn State to bounce back very healthily. Indiana gets the win at Iowa, like I mentioned. They're going to go into a bye week. Texas, coming off a bye week, they're going to be going at Florida, so to the Swamp. We're actually going to talk about their game a little bit more in depth in a second. Bama gets the big win at Georgia. They jump up 7 spots. They are going to be hosting Vanderbilt next, led by Diego Pavia. And we're going to do a little bit more analysis on that in a minute. Tech coming off a bye week. They'll be playing at Houston, who had to muster up a win against Oregon State, who is not good whatsoever. So We will talk about that one a little bit more, but spoiler, Texas Tech is the better team. Georgia losing, hosting Alabama. They will be hosting Kentucky, who is really not even arguable at this point the worst team in the SEC, with Mississippi State looking better and Vanderbilt looking better. I expect Georgia to win by a lot in a big bounce back game. LSU loses at Ole Miss 24-19. They will not be bouncing back this week. They get a bye week. Iowa State wins versus Arizona 39-14. And then they're going to be at Cincinnati, which is going to be a good game because Cincinnati just went toe-to-toe this past week as well. They actually beat Kansas on the road 37-34. Brendan Sorsby is an absolute gamer. He's being added to our gamer watch list. If you don't remember, we're doing superlatives, gamer of the year. Right now, I can tell you our top three is Haynes King, Joey Aguilar, and Brendan Sorsby. Tennessee, they get a win in overtime at Mississippi State. Tennessee really should not have won this game. Mississippi State was winning. They had the game in control. They end up losing in overtime, like I said. Joey Aguilar still looks good. Like I said, top three of gamer of the year. But Mississippi State looks like a completely different team from last year. They're a force to be reckoned with. They're going to be, like I said, going to A&M this week. And I think that game's going to be a little bit closer than what the line is at. Vanderbilt wins against Utah State, another easy game for them. They are 5-0. We're in an era of 16th ranked Vanderbilt. Everyone should absolutely rejoice at this because it's just awesome that it's happening. And they are going to be on the road at Alabama for their next game. Georgia Tech, they went at Wake Forest, and they probably shouldn't have. There was a controversial no call on an offsides, and then which led to a punt, and then they come down and score. The game actually went to overtime. Georgia Tech scored a touchdown and an extra point. Wake Forest gets their opportunity, scores a touchdown, goes for two, and it gets picked off. So Georgia Tech survives. We are in an era, like I said, of 5-0 Vandy and 5-0 Georgia Tech, ranked 16th and 17th. Florida State drops 10 spots. The biggest mover who stayed in the top 25 after their loss at Virginia. They are going to be hosting Miami next week. Missouri beats UMass 42-6. Here's an issue I have with the AP Bowl. They beat UMass. It's UMass. No one's surprised at this. Missouri's good, don't get me wrong, but it's UMass. I'm nothing in that game, aside from if it wasn't a blowout, would change my opinion of them. They move up to 19 from the 20th spot. Michigan drops from 19 to 20 after a bye week. Missouri handily beating UMass should not have led to them jumping Michigan and switching spots with them, in my opinion. It makes no sense. But, it's one of those things. They have to make a ranking. I don't get why enough people change their votes or move them around because of that game. But here we are. Notre Dame is at 21. They move up one spot after absolutely destroying Arkansas. Kind of surprised they stayed there, but at the same time, they did have those losses to Miami and A&M. Their next game is going to be hosting Boise State. Like I said, for Notre Dame to have a chance at making the playoff, they have to smack every team they play, and they cannot have close games or overtime games. Illinois, they win a big one against USC. They move up a spot. They're going to be at Purdue for their next game. While I've said I don't necessarily trust their offense, I think they will win by a lot. BYU, number 23, they move up from 25 after a win at Colorado, which was another nail-biter. Mainly they moved up due to the fact other teams lost. USC dropping out, TCU dropping out after their loss to Arizona State. Virginia jumps into the top 25 at 4-1 after beating Florida State. They're going to be at Louisville, who just had a big comeback win against Pitt. And Arizona State is going to jump into the top 25 after their win against TCU. And then they have a bye week next week. All right, that was our AP poll rapid fire. All right, for our next segment, our games of the week looking forward, we got Iowa State playing against Cincinnati. This is going to be a great one. We've got Cincinnati with Brendan Sorsby being an absolute gamer, and then Iowa State still looking to really find their identity. It's been kind of a year where they're a little all over the place. We should really see what happens moving forward there. What I think is going to happen here is, and by the way, all the teams on the right, so Cincinnati, Florida, Vanderbilt, are the home teams. And then we have the spreads, the expected current spreads. Now we are early because it is Sunday. These spreads are likely going to move. These are the ones we got from FanDuel, though. All spreads are from FanDuel. We are not sponsored, but it'd be really cool. Cincinnati, I think, is going to win this game, being the home team. Brendan Sorsby being a really good quarterback, an absolute gamer. And we've just got the issue of Iowa State not really knowing their identity yet. Their win against Kansas State at the beginning of the year made me get some more hope in them. But now at this point, Kansas State has not looked good at all. So I don't know that I can use that to tell me, yeah, I definitely think that we've got our guy here in Rocco Beck. That being said, Iowa State hasn't looked bad either. They've won the games that they've needed to. They're doing well. This is an 11 a.m. kickoff. I'm taking Cincinnati in this game to win outright. Emory did send me all of his picks for this, so I'm going to get those pulled up. Give me just a moment. Emory's pick is for Cincinnati to cover the 2.5 points, and he actually expects them to win. So same with me. We just don't think Iowa State can get it done in games like this. Texas and Florida. Texas is a 7.5 point favorite. They're going to be going to the swamp, like I was saying. This is a game where we need to see Billy Napier pull out a win, or his seat is only going to keep getting hotter, and we're probably going to see Florida move on if they can't get it done. Emory's pick for this is Texas covering the 7.5 point spread and Texas winning. Part of this is DJ Lagway was in a walking boot after their last game. They did have a bye this past week. So part of this is going to hinge on his health. This feels like a game where Florida does really well for absolutely no reason. And DJ Lagway plays his butt off and Billy Napier saves his job. And it's one of those weird dark magic voodoo, whatever you want to call it, where it happens. The swamp's a weird place to play. I actually think I'm going to go ahead and call the upset here. Florida takes down Arch Manning in Texas, and it's going to be weird, but that's where I'm going with it. But that does hinge on Lagway being healthy. I think if he's not healthy, Texas wins this game by 3 touchdowns. And we see Florida's defense fall apart just from a lack of offense. Assuming they have a good offense, I think their defense is going to play well, though, and this will be a close game, and I'm leaning more Florida. Vanderbilt going to Tuscaloosa, playing at Alabama. This is where college game day is going to be. We've got undefeated Vanderbilt and one loss Alabama, with their one loss being to Florida State. Alabama coming off a huge win at Georgia, though, and heading back home. Vanderbilt coming off an easy win against Utah State. They actually struggled a little bit, but they got the job done. Emory's pick for this one is Bama, but Vandy covering the 13.5 point spread, and I completely agree with that. I do think that Diego Pavia he's an absolute gamer as well. We'll extend our list, put him in top 4 as well. The guy's awesome, super fun to watch. I think this game stays pretty close throughout it, but I do think Bama ultimately wins the game. But I do think Vanderbilt will cover. And, Bama last year did lose this game. I just don't see that happening again. Bama's just too talented, but they are inconsistent. So that's going to be their big issue, is just making sure they've grown from that Florida State loss. They continue to win. They continue to play well. Jam Miller is back, their running back. Made a season debut against Georgia and played really well. And they did look better on offense with him. So I think Bama wins, but I think it stays close. Miami is going to be going to Florida State this week. Miami's a 6.5 point favorite. Emory, trying to take out all the bias whenever we make, as we'll do in a minute, the A&M picks and then the Florida State picks. But Florida State is going to be a 6.5 point dog. Right now, I think I'm going to lean Florida State, and not just the spread. I think we're calling another outright upset. So similar to my Florida one, slightly less of an upset in this situation, but I think Florida State does win this game. I just like their talent. There's a Nick Saban said multiple times he was not necessarily happy, but that his teams needed to lose because they needed to remind themselves they do have faults. They do have areas they need to improve on, and they're almost like ways to bounce back. And those teams did get better each time. I think Florida State does that, and I think they expose Miami a little bit. and we see a fun upset. Maybe they'll storm the field. That'd be awesome. Still a fan of it. Tommy Castellanos will bounce back. He provides such an amazing dual threat option. Emory's pick on this is the same. He picked Florida State to win outright, saying they also needed a wake-up call. He is still on team fire Mike Norvell. He does not like Mike Norvell. I get it. I had to suffer through Jimbo Fisher, who used to be a Florida State head coach. And there are points when even when you're doing well, you just want it. You know it's not the right coach. You just feel it. That's how Emory feels here. He obviously wants them to win. He expects them to win just from an analyst standpoint. But he's still on team fire Mike Norvell. All that being said, we're both going Florida State in this matchup. Tech and Houston. Tech going to Houston. Both teams undefeated. Houston's played absolutely no one. Tech has played Utah, but also an easy schedule up to that point. Tech being a 12.5 point favorite, there's not a whole lot either of us really have to say on this one. We both think Tech's going to win and win handily. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 3-4 score game. Tech is just superior as far as talent. Houston, again, just hasn't really done much to prove anything. Connor Wigman still looks like Connor Wigman, better than last year, but not meeting the expectations, the Houston quarterback. I think Tech wins handily. Last game of the week, Mississippi State's going to A&M. Whenever I do these, I try to stay as unbiased as possible. A&M is the better team. I personally think A&M wins. I don't think they cover the spread. I think this ends up being a touchdown game, similar to Mississippi State and Tennessee. I think A&M wins by 7 points. I think we're going to see a really fun game. Mississippi State's going to have a lot of offense. A&M has to figure out if the defense they played against Auburn is because of Auburn's bad offense. And I'm still team Fire Hugh Freeze, by the way, Auburn's head coach. Or if A&M's putting it together on defense now, but then they got to get the offense going, because if the defense struggles at all, they're going to need to put up points. I'll take A&M winning, but not covering the spread. Mississippi State covering the spread. And the reason I did not give Emory's is because we're getting to Superdogs. I'm actually going to do his first because of that game. He has Mississippi State covering the 12.5. So his pick is the same as mine, A&M winning, but Mississippi State covering the 12.5 points, mainly for the reasons I gave. Mississippi State looks a lot better than they did last year, vastly improved, complete 180, similar to like Florida State. But just not there yet as far as winning the game, but able to cover the spread. They should have beat Tennessee. They're coming off a heartbreaking loss. We'll see if that affects anything. But Jeff Lebby's done a really good job turning that program around. My Superdog, Vanderbilt. All the reasons I listed earlier. I know they're on the road, so is Mississippi State for that matter. But they're gamers. Diego Pavia is a gamer. They got one of the best tight ends in the country in Eli Stowers. And I think Bama's just not consistent enough yet at this point in the year. I don't know if Kalen DeBoer is still the guy for them, but I think Vanderbilt keeps this one close. I do think Bama wins, but I think Vanderbilt will cover that 13.5 points. And last but not least, our Heisman hopefuls. Dante Moore jumps all the way up to number 1 at plus 750. These are all from FanDuel as well, similar to his spreads. Carson Beck at number 2. And these are all betting odds, by the way. These are not a ranking. They're not based on stats. They are betting odds. Jeremiah Smith is at plus 1,000. Ty Simpson for Alabama plus 1,000. Fernando Mendoza stays up there at 1,200. Trinidad Chambliss jumps in at plus 1,500. Julian Sayin now at Ohio State plus 1,700. And then Diego Pavia made him the logo because he's an absolute gamer. Can't say it enough. He's up there at plus 1,700. And if you had told me the guy at New Mexico State who was making wild plays just a couple years ago in games they should have no business being in, was going to be a Heisman candidate, or at least someone people are betting on to win the Heisman with reasonable odds, I would have said you're lying, obviously. But here we are. He's doing really well. I'm excited to see it. Big fan of that. So we do have 2 people, Ty Simpson and Diego Pavia, going head-to-head this week, that people are thinking, hey, maybe they might win the Heisman. That's everything I got for you. We're going to stop sharing. Thank you all very much for joining me. again, it's very difficult to do this on my own without Emory here for conversation back and forth. So please like, comment, subscribe, leave any segments you liked, any segments you didn't, any segments I can improve on, or things you just think could be better, or ways to improve it, what you would just like to hear if you're listening to this at work or for fun, or on your car drive, or whatever the case may be. That makes it a little bit more entertaining, a little bit more fun for you. I really enjoy doing this, and I'm going to keep doing as much research as I can on college football and enjoying every game I can. Emory's going to keep feeding me his thoughts. Let me know if there's anything else y'all would like to see. Otherwise, thank y'all very much for joining me, and y'all have a great week.